Hello and welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop solution for an English medium UPSC civil services aspirant. Today, as part of your Hindu analysis, we'll be discussing 5 important articles out of the Delhi edition and 2 out of the international edition. Now, as always, before we begin, a very important announcement for you because this seems to be the last day for this offer itself. On 7th May, the most affordable pricing for our course 24,999 will be over, and this is the best chance to become the part of the Unacademy family with regards to any of our courses, because this is the most affordable course price we have ever launched. So this is a very important last call for everybody. This will end tomorrow. Today is your day to enroll into an Unacademy IAS course with English as your medium. With this, let's move to the next important announcement. As you already know, now today we transition to international relations, which is yesterday we had a very exciting session, a 3-hour long marathon session of Sarmad Sir on polity, and that was the last session of polity itself. And now from today onwards in Conquer Prelims Part 2 or Phase 2, which is happening on YouTube, Chethan Sir will be taking on 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th 4 sessions on current affairs based on international relations at 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. So this is a very important announcement for you that the first session for international relations is going to happen today, and at 7:30 he will be live. Join us live so that you can answer the questions. The poll is also being used. You can answer the question. The live chat is open, and over that he will answer all questions you have on the spot vis-a-vis the live chat feature, which will be used as a live concept. So please do come live in these sessions. It is very, very important. So this is the new thing, which is we already had 5 sessions of polity. I hope polity has totally been revised vis-a-vis the special sessions on the app, plus the sessions which happened on YouTube. Together, polity, current affairs and static has been covered very comprehensively by Sir. And I hope that now you are totally revised, totally fully confident in polity. After that, my 4th session, which is the phase 1 app based special session, which is the Unacademy app. All the links are given in the description box. The 4th session with regards to, we are doing 15 questions every day. This is the static portion. We've already done 45. Today we make it 60, and we are now discussing, we've transitioned from medieval to ancient, and we will go into modern very soon. So the next session is going to be modern. This is the second session of medieval India. So do join us here at 6 p.m. This is going to be a 1-hour session, 6 to 7 on the app. So this is on the Unacademy app itself. So I hope that you are basically placing your preparation properly. For anybody who's 2024, this may be a revision point. For anybody who's 2025, you will get a feel on how you have to prepare when it comes to the last crunch period of the last one, what we call as 30 to 45 days. So we are running these programs specifically for you, and I hope you are joining us for that. Remember, after this session is over, Telegram channel, 5 questions will be uploaded for prelims orientation out of the topics which we've covered today, and all the links are also provided on the Telegram channel, so, and the link is given in the description box. With this, let's look at the topics we are going to cover. First, the need for an Indian Defense University. Second, a very interesting data point article out of the Hindu about the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya scheme itself. Thereafter, for the cautionary tale of Bangalore, and more than that, what does Bengaluru or Bangalore teach us with regards to how to do water management. Thereafter, 2 small topics. One, a new change in the railways with regards to reservation of seats itself. And last but not the least, there are multiple bids, 2 very important bids, a German and a Spanish, on our Project 75I of submarines in India. And these 2 are of the international edition in that regard. Page numbers are also mentioned here. With this, let's start our analysis. And let's understand the first topic, which deals with the time to operationalize the Indian Defense University. Now, what this topic basically talks about is there's a very interesting quote in this article written by a former Chief of Navy Staff itself. That is why it's a very important article itself. The idea is, he gives a very, very beautiful line. He says that while the nature of war remains constant, its changing character needs military education to change with time, and to have our military personnel what we today call as a very important terminology, which is called professional military education, called PME, professional military education. So the idea which he's pushing is that there is a need for professional military education in India for a simple reason, because while war, the nature remains the same, maybe the issues remain the same, the character keeps on changing. And with new types of technology being used in warfare, with new types of chemicals, new types of what we call as drone technology, be it defense technology, be it ammunition, there needs to be a professional education of the military personnel, and for that you need a certain framework. So the first word which becomes very important for us is PME, which is professional military education. And the idea that in a changing world, military and civil personnel both have to train themselves in skills which may not have been relevant previously but are relevant today. Now, let's take the example that today, if an armed force personnel, if he wants to get a degree vis-a-vis being within the armed forces itself, that is allowed, you can take education leave, and you are the armed forces encourage their personnel to get degrees other than what they already have in that regard. So the armed forces, as of right now, you have, if you want to take a degree, you have two options. One has just recently emerged. If you want to take a specific degree, there are affiliated universities to which you can get a certain degree. So for example, you wanted to do a BSc in physics or a BSc in chemistry, you are in the armored section, you wanted to do what we call as a BSc in metallurgy or metal technology, so that can be done with an affiliated university in that regard. And the other option which has recently emerged is what is called as the RRU, which is Rashtriya Yaksha University. And what the author points out, a veteran himself, is that the problem is that if we go by either routes, yes, the personnel will get a degree. But the problem is that neither the curricula or the syllabuses or the orientation of the affiliated universities and even RRU in that regard is towards defense requirements, defense military tactics, and what the nature of defense and war wants right now. So yes, we have two ways of getting as an armed force personnel a certain degree within being the part of the military personnel itself, or you are encouraged to get a degree within what we call as the military itself. But the problem is professional military education, the level at which it is happening in China, for example, it is happening in Australia or the US, it is not happening in India. So the first point he says is there a need? And the answer to that question is yes. Is there a need for an Indian Defense University, IDU? The answer is yes, because the present mechanism does not gear them with the right skill set to deal with what they need to deal with. So now comes the concept that have we identified this need previously, and has there been a certain deliberation on this? And herein lies the importance of this article, because there's a certain timeline he points out, and this is something where a commission name also comes through. The need for the first time which was created, the IDU concept that Indian Defense Universities needed, was in 1967, when the Chiefs of Staff Committee said that we should have a defense university or defense services university wherein civil, military, both personnel come in. We have academia and retired personnel coming in and giving their specific expertise, and it becomes one central location, one umbrella organization in which both the military and the civil, meaning for example retired armed personnel plus retired IPS officers, CRPF officers, CISF officers, they can come together and then discuss with the candidates, with the students who are the aspirants or the military personnel who are coming there to train about military tactics, changing needs, the concept of what we call as community control, the concept of crowd control. These are things which are becoming more and more important. Therefore, the need for a defense service university was something which was talked about in 1967 itself. Thereafter, in 1982, there was a study group which was constituted by the same body, the chief of staffs, and therefore it again said that there needs to be an apex educational body so that the Indian Defense University is created. After that, again it went into hiatus, an issue which has been very slowly progressing and with a lot of deliberation happening in the background. It is after the Kargil war that there was a specific committee which was established under the chairmanship of Dr. K. Subramaniam, who discussed the idea that do we really need an IDU? The need had already been created in 82, but again there's a deliberation on the concept that should we go for an IDU, and the recommendation was yes. And based on that, in 2010, finally after 10 years of delay again, in principle approval for the IDU came that the IDU campus will be established in Gurgaon, and in 2010 it was said that yes, we agree that India needs an IDU, which is Indian Defense University. However, it is still not operational, and there have been multiple reports on the fact that this development has been more than what it should have been when it comes to its pace. So the idea is very, very simple. IDU is needed. In principle approval came in 2010, but when it comes to its progress, it is very, very slow. So in 2018, 2017, 2018, there was another report which said that the progress is been very, very slow. So it is not satisfactory the way this has been going forward. So therefore, now for the purpose of the examination, since the 60s, the need for an IDU was talked about. In the 80s, it was reiterated again. After the Kargil war, we get a specific committee for that itself. And later, we have in principle approval coming in the 2010 decade itself. Thereafter, the idea is still this is not operational. And that is why the article, as you see, reads, it is time to operationalize the IDU, because in principle approval is already there. So the idea is very, very simple, and the concept is very critical for India's defense prowess in that regard. See, professional military education is something which has been identified as very, very important in the nature of how war is being fought today, how diplomacy is working, and how military tactics are being used on the ground. And therefore, when we talk about PME, there has been a need for an Indian Defense University which does not become a conglomeration of different universities, but becomes an apex body which can bring all the organizations and more than that, all the right faculty, personnel, expertise together to impart the right curricula, which is the most important point. It's not that you cannot get a degree within the military. You need the right degree and the right expertise. And therefore, since 1960s, there has been a call for this. 2010, there came the in principle approval. But as of 2024, close to 14 years down the line, the IDU is not operational. And therefore, there is a need to operationalize it and make sure that the IDU becomes the apex body which can bring everything together. So there are two issues which are inherent to this concept itself, which is relevant for you in the examination. First is a conversation around the Indian Defense University. Is it needed? Is it not needed? Was it needed previously? And the second is the need itself. What is professional military education? The need for it, and why does RRU, for example, does not fulfill the criteria, or the affiliated universities do not fulfill the criteria because they don't per se go for defense requirements or the defense training which should be given to our personnel in that regard. So therefore, before I close this topic, a small one, a straightforward one, you should remember this flowchart, which is that from 1967 itself, there has been a call for an IDU. In 2010, the in principle approval came, but the progress has been extremely slow, and therefore we need to make sure that we come out of this framework, which is getting degrees from affiliated universities, which basically do not really teach defense requirements and defense technology or defense tactics. Rather, it is a random degree which is given to anybody and everybody. and there needs to be a IDU which becomes an apex body for all the requirements regards to professional military education. With this, let's move to the second topic, which is more interesting when it comes to how data gives you a lot of new insights and things can come through with regards to a case study in Chhattisgarh. So the article is about the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, and we also call it Ayushman Bharat in that regard. And it has a very interesting data point set. It's called Data Point. It's a specific article which comes in the Hindu newspaper. And it talks about the expenses over the pocket, and over and above that, it talks about the coverage. So there is a lot of interesting aspects which this data point from Chhattisgarh gives you. It's based on Chhattisgarh state medical report which has come recently, the medical expenses report, and therefore it is talking about 4 very important issues which have emerged in that regard. Now first, let's understand what are the terminologies which it is using. First is the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which is basically the Ayushman Bharat scheme itself, called PMJAY. It is also using one more terminology, PFHI, which is public funded health insurance. Public funded health insurance. And in Chhattisgarh, there is not just one which is PMJ. There used to be a bigger framework. Previously, it used to be Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. Then it got subsumed in 2008 into Prime Minister's what we call as Jan Arogya Yojana itself. But there's also a state scheme which is called Mukhyamantri Swasthya Bima Yojana. So there are 3 schemes which are working, which used to work in that regard, which is you have one which now subsumes the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which is the RSBY, is now part of the PMJ itself. But there is the Pradhan Mantri, the Mukhyamantri scheme related to Swasthya Bima Yojana, which is called MSBY, So you have MSBY. These are 3 terminologies which are being used. The Mukhyamantri Swasthya Bima Yojana, MSBY. Thereafter PFHI, which is public funded health insurance. Thereafter PMJ, which or what we call as Jan Arogya Yojana, which includes the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. So again, to give you a timeline very simply, I'll remove everything which is written here, which is, see, very simply, all of them come under the idea of PFHI, which is which is public funded health insurance, which is it is funded by the government. Here there are 2 timelines. Till 2008, there used to be Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, and thereafter in 2008, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana basically subsumed this one. And there has been one scheme which has been going on since that same period, which is the Mukhyamantri Swasthya Bima Yojana. So the reason I'm telling you this is because these terminologies have been used in the tables, and you should be able to read the table properly to get the answer. So now that we understand that these schemes have existed, and these are the schemes which are in focus, you see PFHI, RSBY, PMJ, MSB. So this is Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. This is Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. This is Mukhyamantri Swasthya Bima Yojana. PFHI means public funded health insurance. Now let's try to analyze the data, and it will give us a certain understanding. Now there are 3 tables in table 1. First one gives you the share of population in Chhattisgarh which is enrolled under a PFHI, which is publicly funded health insurance. What is the percentage of the population? So in 2004, there was no real scheme as of right now, so the data is not available. In 2014, the data was 38.8% under Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. Thereafter, when the migration of data properly happened, then by 2019, the same data you have addition of close to 6-7%, and 45.8% data of 45.8% of the population of Chhattisgarh is enrolled under the publicly funded health insurance schemes. But you can see who are not under the publicly funded health schemes are also a big number, which is 32%. It is 32%. So, though the transition happened in 2008, the data is only available from 2014 onwards when the data was transferred into Prime Minister Jan Arogya. I'll call it Ayushman Bharat for easy. So this is Ayushman Bharat scheme. This is the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. There's a migration of data which will happen after 2014, and therefore we have 45% coverage of people under Ayushman Bharat and 32% under no scheme itself. This is still okay. The more problematic aspect is this is the share of population which had access to hospitals, and this is the share of population which got hospitalized in a private hospital itself. Now you will see a pattern here. The pattern is that when it comes to share of population having accessibility to the hospitals itself, overall 5.9%, 3%, non-enrolled 2.9%, 5.7%. Basically, these PFHIs, which is public funded health insurance schemes, did not increase substantially the coverage of people who were having accessibility to hospitals. This is a very important point. Though they are under an insurance scheme, they do not have a proper access to hospitals, which is the physical access to hospital itself, and therefore giving an insurance scheme automatically will not translate into better accessibility. This is a very important point because there's a very marginal increase of 2% when it comes to population share accessibility to hospital. So you can see, though the coverage has increased, PFHI coverage has increased, accessibility has not correspondingly increased. Further, the fact that you have now Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana or Ayushman Bharat has increased the percentage of people who now go to a private sector bank than who have now reduced. Basically, the people who are not part of the PFHI are not going to private sector banks. They are rather going to public sector banks or public bank, not banks, hospitals, public sector hospitals rather, sorry. So you have PFHI enrolled the public sector hospitals. The PFHI enrolled have increased. On the other hand, public sector hospitals, the people have reduced. So when you are not under a public funded health insurance scheme, you have stopped going to a hospital which is public sector, private sector, and rather there's an increase. So what is the pattern? When I'm under a public funded health insurance scheme, my tendency is to go to a private hospital in that regard. And if I'm not under a publicly funded health insurance scheme, then I'm not going towards a private hospital in that regard. So the percentage is giving you that idea. You can see from 53.6% in 2014, now only 28% go to a private hospital. On the other hand, from 32%, 45% people go to a private hospital because they know that Ayushman Bharat is going to cover my cost. So based on table 1, a lot of data, you don't have to learn the data. What is the conclusion? The conclusion is very straightforward and simple. The first thing is that the coverage of people under PFHIs has increased, which is a public funded health insurance scheme. The coverage has increased to 45%. Still a substantial population is outside it. Second conclusion is, though the coverage has increased, the percentage of population which is having access to a hospital has not increased. So there's no corresponding exponential growth in accessibility. So therefore, an insurance scheme automatically does not guarantee accessibility. And the last, and why we are having this conversation, because this is very important for ethics. You get case studies, so you should know how certain schemes work, and therefore it will give you an idea how to write a good answer for ethics. Last but not the least is, if you are under a public funded health insurance, you are going to a private hospital, and if you are not enrolled in a private, what we call as a public funded health insurance, you are not going to a private hospital. This is a very important point. The share of people going to a private hospital has increased if you're under Ayushman Bharat, has decreased if you're not under Ayushman Bharat. That has a both positive and negative impact. Positive impact is people have now more confidence in the Ayushman Bharat scheme itself, but it also increased the load of the public hospitals or government hospitals, because people who had previously been going to a private hospital itself are now going to a public hospital. This is a very important point. So it increases the pressure on government hospitals rather than private hospitals. Private hospitals would love more footfall because that is how they generate revenue, and therein lies the anomaly, and that is why we're having this discussion. So what have we done till this point? There has been an increased coverage of public funded health insurance. There has been no substantial increase in accessibility to hospitals, and the people who are going to private sector hospitals are more related to a Ayushman Bharat scheme or an insurance scheme which the government is giving than the people who are outside the purview. So these 32% of the people who previously would have gone to a private sector hospital in that regard are now avoiding it because of costs. So this is the first conclusion, three first conclusions we come to through the first data. Now, if you look at the next data, you will get an even more distorted picture. The table 2 has two main, what we call as tables, A and B. The first one gives you what is called out of the pocket, over the pocket, what is called out of the pocket expenditure. OOPE. Out of the pocket expenditure means that even if you have an insurance, what are you paying out of your pocket even when the insurance scheme was applied? So out of pocket expenditure ideally should be lower for a publicly funded health insurance patient and more for a non-PFHI patient. Now, this one gives you the mean, which is the average, and this one gives you the what we call as median. Median means the middle value, and this one means average. Now, the anomaly emerges. You see, if you are under a PFHI scheme, the public in 2004 used to give 8,603 rupees out of pocket. Then it became 3,491. Then it became 3,000. So you can see, as soon as the concept of a publicly funded insurance scheme came through, the cost of going to a government hospital became more or less half. But if you're in a private sector, private sector hospital, then 15,000, 22,000, 26,000. This is where there is an anomaly that this should have also gone down. Because if there's a corresponding decrease here, wherein your cost of going to a government hospital has gone down because of using a public health insurance scheme in that regard, the private sector cost should have also gone down. So the out of the pocket, the over the pocket expenditure which was there is still extremely high. It is increasing. But what is even more problematic is, you see here, the people who are not enrolled, the data and the out of the pocket expenditure is very similar, which is 2,900, 20,000. So the difference between a person who is actually not enrolled and enrolled, there is a major differentiation, 19,000, 20,000. 1,000 difference is there. This means that even though the public funded health insurance was applied, there is some form of data anomaly, which we will talk about what is the anomaly in that regard. But this is the problem. 19,000 for a person under Ayushman Bharat, 20,000 for a person not enrolled. If you go to the median data, you will find a similar pattern, which is that 7,500, 378. This is the middle, meaning all data. This is the middle data in that regard, which is basically median. But you see, you have under Prime Minister Jan Arogya Yojana 7299 8759. So the idea is that even though you are enrolled under a publicly funded health insurance, then how is that the median and the mean both are similar for a non-enrolled and an enrolled personality? And therein lies the anomaly, that what the conclusion we can come to is that there is double billing. Double billing in that regard means that on one hand, they are taking money from the patient also, the private banks, the private hospitals, and the same point of time, they are taking money from the government also. And that is why the data point is not far away. That is why the data point is not far away. This means that private hospitals are double billing. They are first telling the patient that your Ayushman Bharat does not cover this, so you give me 20,000. On the other hand, they are billing on Ayushman Bharat that this patient came with this ailment and this is the cost of it. And they're taking 20,000 or 19,000 out of the insurance of that person as under Ayushman Bharat in that regard. And what is even more concerning is this data, which is what is called catastrophic health expenditure. Catastrophic health expenditure is when the health expenditure was 25% of the annual income of that person. Now you see, how can it be that the data point here is so similar, that they are in the same 4%, which is that the same person is also taking money from the public health insurance, and also he is not enrolled at the same point of time. So the conclusion which the Hindu newspaper comes through, the data analysis comes through, is that there is double billing where the hospitals will claim money from the insurance provider also, but also illegally charge the patients, and therefore Ayushman Bharat scheme, which would have reduced the cost of the money being pushed out of pocket, has actually not reduced it. The same exact, that is why you can see it is called PMJ did not reduce patients' health expenses. Now, I've talked about a lot of things. A lot of data has been discussed. Now, the question is, what do you do with this data? Obviously, you're not showing these tables to the examiner, or you cannot make these tables in the examination. But we can come to 5 conclusions. These 5 conclusions are critical for you to understand what is coming out of this, and therefore it gives you a certain larger picture. I hope that the PFHI concept, private public hospitals, and the differentiation mode, the mean and median, which is the costs, are clear to you. But all of this is immaterial if you can understand the 5 concepts which we have to understand. There are 5 conclusions which I will write down for you. This is very, very important. So what is the takeaway? What is the takeaway? The takeaway first is that coverage under public funded health insurance has increased to 45%, and this is only for Chhattisgarh. This is only for Chhattisgarh. We will see if it is true for other states also, but this is only for Chhattisgarh. But it can be made into a generalized understanding. Though it has increased to 45%, 32% still remain outside. This is a very specific data for Chhattisgarh. Now, the second conclusion is insurance coverage. Insurance coverage automatically did not increase accessibility. This is a very important point, that somehow giving insurance will obviously not increase the accessibility to a hospital. So the accessibility to the hospital is not there. Third is that percentage of population under PFHI going to private hospital has increased, but percentage of population not under PFHI going to private hospital has decreased, which is obvious because they are getting the insurance claim from the government, the first group, but the second group isn't. But ironically, as we can see in the data, this has not translated into less out-of-pocket expenditure. Now, if these three conclusions are fine to you, then we can talk about the next two, which is one second, the idea that when it comes to PFHI, there are two more conclusions, 4 and 5. The fourth conclusion is out of pocket expenditure has not reduced for PFHI enrolled patients in private, and this basically comes to the grand conclusion which we can come to, which is there is double billing wherein the hospitals are extracting both from the insurance and the patient, which is the malpractice here and needs to be done in every state to point out what is the issue. So when we talk about this whole conclusion, the 4 and 5, if we add it, this is an eye-opening episode for us because this gives us an understanding that when out of the pocket hospitalization expenses are not getting reduced, whilst the enrollment is increasing, then it only indicates towards the fact that when there is so much what we call as congruence between the people who are paying 25% and more, even if they're enrolled and not enrolled, then what is the point? And therefore, this data is very, very eye-opening. This 19,000 and this 20,000, this 7,000 and this 8,000. There's a very, very small deviation, which should have been a major deviation. And you can see that deviation, for example, in public hospitals, not in private. There is a lot of malpractice which is happening. So I hope that you understand these three conclusions along with the other one. And this could be a very good case study to also use it in ethics, because if they give you, for example, a case study on insurance schemes, hospitalization, you can always talk about accessibility is more important than just having schemes. Schemes automatically don't increase accessibility. That's a very important point I'm trying to emphasize, which came through here, that though insurance coverage has increased, accessibility has not increased substantially. Only at 5% of the 45% who are covered, which is a major deviation in that sense. So data point is always interesting. Sometimes it is not related to UPSC, but this time it was related to UPSC and gives you a certain understanding. So I hope first article, second article totally clear. And please understand this point, that public sector hospitals are a very important lifeline. If the people will be charged more in private sector, they will automatically increase pressure on the public hospitals, which is very, very important. Okay. With this, let's talk about Bangalore. What has been happening in Bangalore in that regard? Now we already know that Bangalore is going through a proper crisis. When it comes to water, it has never been more worse than this. And more than that, erratic rainfall and rainfall shortage has made it even more problematic. Now, when you talk about Bangalore, why are we discussing this topic? Because the article argues that Bangalore is a cautionary tale. That Bangalore is a cautionary tale with regards to how other urban cities or urban zones or towns or urbanization patterns can get affected by the same thing. Now, what is the beauty of the article is it has given 3-tiered solutions: immediate, medium term, long term. This is important for us because when it comes to water, you are sometimes, or there has been at least one question every alternative year on how do you mitigate water crisis. And therefore, this article becomes important because it gives you the mitigation understanding of water crisis itself in medium, long, and immediate terms. So, first, let's understand why is that Bangalore itself is reeling under what it is reeling. Now, it has identified four very important categories. Firstly, the elevation of Bangalore. See, it argues that being 900 meters above sea level itself, the Kaveri being at 300, the fact is that the government and the public water suppliers use a lot of electricity to pump water out of the Kaveri into Bangalore. And Bangalore historically has mostly been reliant on the lakes which were there, plus the groundwater resources. Now, the first thing is, as it is, the groundwater depletion has been quite severe, and Kaveri can only fulfill 50% of the demand of Bangalore. 50% comes out of borewells which have already been depleted. Out of 11,000 borewells which are there in Bangalore, 800 have become more or less useless. But the problem is that one is over extraction, the other one is with erratic rainfall, climate change, and what we call as senseless urbanization. Lakes have also started to dry up in Bangalore. So whilst lakes could give that 50% or cover that 50%, lakes are depleted, senseless urbanization on encroaching upon lakes itself. So on one hand, you have the issue of lakes not having the right amount of water on which most of the water tankers are based on. Groundwater water getting depleted further. There's an elevation difference between Kaveri and Bangalore. Therefore, there's a need to pump that water into Bangalore, which has a cost of its own and is problematic. And over and above that, Kaveri can only meet 50% of the what we call as demand. So this disaster has been in the making for decades now because senseless borewelling, senseless water depletion, senseless urbanization with no heed to what is going to happen in future generations. And in 2024, finally, we have a water crisis beyond exception in one of the most urbanized, most posh areas of Bangalore also. So therefore, let's be very honest, this was making for decades. We knew that we were not meeting the demand by 50%, had to come from groundwater or tanks, and we have depleted the water also, we have depleted the groundwater also, lakes also, and Kaveri can't meet the demand. Now comes, how can we come out of this? As it says, the Bangalore crisis serves as a harbinger of what may be coming in other cities in India later, at least in the next decade. Bangalore type situation will be created, at least 5 to 6 zones in that regard. So how do we mitigate it? Immediate, medium term, long term. That is why this article is important. Now, immediately it gives three solutions. Immediately it gives three solutions. First is demand management. This is the most obvious one, which is rationing of water. More than that, the demand of water, how it is spread across the city should be understood. Why is it in that context so skewed in certain areas? And are there industrial zones which are using the water which could have gone into household? And the use of smart water meters can help us understand how water is being rationed across the whole city. So first, the municipal corporation BBMP has to understand how what demand is coming from which area or what is the demand. So therefore, the supply should be managed accordingly. Second is water conservation and reduce consumption by also using technology. For example, we need faucets, we need pumps which are more efficient, we need technology which is available also, wherein household water consumption can go down. So at one level, we need to reduce the demand. At the same time, we need to understand the demand and also create a certain culture in which we conserve water. So water conservation culture should obviously be there without a crisis or not a crisis. But the point is, it's about consumption. Can we reduce consumption at the same point of time understanding the demand? So in a very immediate context, a city cannot do too much. It can only ration water in such a way by dividing and understanding the demand in that sense. But what is more interesting is how do we understand it in medium term? In medium term, maybe in the next 4 to 5 years, what Bangalore needs to do is first has to make sure that rainwater harvesting systems are installed in most of the households, because as groundwater is a very important resource for most of Bangalore, with though the climate change has impacted the weather of Bangalore itself also with very erratic rainfall, the water harvesting systems has to be installed so that we are recycling at least we are not wasting and allowing the rainwater to go into storm drains, and therefore fresh water is replenished. In medium term, this is the first. Second, third, and fourth are related to each other. The fourth is the first one, which is we have to make sure that our pipeline, supply chain, and everything is regularly maintained, which is we are making sure that there's no leakages and loss in transportation of water, which would literally be a crime as of right now. Then further, we need to have wastewater management and storm drain management, which is water after being, for example, diverted to freshwater resources, aquifers through rainwater. Still, the water which is going into the storm drains, into the drains itself, they need to be treated, and water treatment plants need to be more efficient. As of right now, there are 2 to 3 major water treatment plants in Bangalore, but that water is not reused, it is pushed into lakes. And that is also problematic because some of it is also industrial water. So the lakes ecosystem is also changing because of industrial water getting reused or not properly reused or treated in that sense. Therefore, there can be a mechanism in which that within the city itself, when it comes to sewage, when it comes to grey water use, at least the treated water can be used more efficiently. So in the medium term, it is about treating, it is about recycling, it is about water harvesting, it is about, at the end of the day, maintaining our resources properly. However, in the long term, there has to be a realization that the Kaveri cannot meet the water demand of Bangalore. So therefore, it has to stop citing the fact that we are getting water from a certain source and that is not coming. It is a distant source. And more than that, because of elevation change, we are also putting in a lot of what we call as electricity energy to bring it to Bangalore itself. So you need better urban planning. You need better lake conservation, which was used to be the lifeline of Bangalore. They need to be revived. Encroached spaces needs to be given back to lakes itself. And further, preserve lakes and borewell management. Borewell management is also very important because the rate at which we are extracting the water is more than what the rate at which it is getting replenished. And therefore, borewell management is something which has to be done. And therefore, while we have smart water meters on the Kaveri water supplies, but we also need to have borewell management on people not misusing borewells for industrial use via a household itself. So this article is actually extremely valuable to you because it gives you a long-term, short-term, and a immediate solution to water crisis. So if you look at it, when it talks about immediate, immediate is only about behavior. We have to change our behavior with regards to conserving water, but also demand management in that sense. This is not a solution. This is just short-term mitigation. That's it. On the other hand, in the medium term, which is in the next 5 years, we have to make sure that rainwater, wastewater, and the maintenance of all the different resources are done properly so that we are replenishing our aquifers, and lake management comes as long term. In long term, we have to revive the lakes of Bangalore plus also borewell management. Now, this may be not true for your city, but every city has a certain way of getting water. And be it Delhi, be it Mumbai, be it Chennai, be it all the metropolitan cities, or even cities like Lucknow or Kanpur, the way urbanization is happening, the way there is an increase in demand in water, there will always be a limitation to water supply. So if the cities cannot learn from the Bangalore experience, then we will have more disasters like this happening in the short term and in the medium term for sure. So Bangalore is a cautionary tale, and these are points which can be used by you to give a very good answer in GS paper 3 with regards to water conservation. So 3 very good, very beautifully written articles. First, talking about the need for the concept of an IDU, which is an Indian Defense University, how there has been a lot of traction behind it till 1960s, but has not been materialized or has not materialized till today in that regard. Second is a very interesting thing, which is insurance coverage, public funded insurance coverage, plus how there should have been less out of the pocket, over the pocket expenditure, but that has actually not reduced substantially, which is telling us double billing. And last but not the least is how Bengaluru's experience can be used by other cities to make sure that the same experience, the same crisis, the same hue and cry it is not created in the new emerging towns and cities and in the old urbanized zones of India. So if we can't learn from our mistakes, then what's the point of doing those mistakes? So please understand this point, that over a long term we have to learn from these mistakes, because they will only give us a solution for other crises to be averted. With this, let's move to two very small and straightforward articles. The first one being that there has been a new reservation policy with regards to now disabled Divyangjans getting 4 seats reserved, irrespective of the fact that have they taken the fare on concessional rate or not. As of right now, what was the rule? That if you have taken a disability concessional fare rate, then you cannot be reserved a seat on the train, or there was no concept of reservation of seats in that regard for disabled men and women. On the other hand, now it doesn't really matter if it has been taken on a concessional fare or not, but in every train there will be specific coaches, at least four seats in Rajdhanis, in Vande Bharat trains, in the sleepers, in express trains, and even in chair cars there will be 4, not sleepers, but seats which will be reserved for these men and women who need our assistance. And therefore the railways is changing the process of how they help the vulnerable sections of the society, and specifically disabled, by not just giving them concessional rates, but also reservation quota within these trains. This is a very important development. Generally, let's see how does this get what we call as applied, implemented. But as of right now, this is a very important and interesting development. The last thing which I want to discuss with you is basically related to the concept of Project 75I. So Project 75I is a project in which we are developing what we call as indigenously developed, but initially 45%, later 60%, indigenously developed submarines. Now, under this, there are 2 major pushes which are coming through. One is German, which is the TKMS, and we have one from Spain. Now, ironically, German contractors were not very keen to get involved in defense cooperation previously, but in the context of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, what we've seen is that Germany has become extremely proactive, and as of right now is ready to meet most of the 90% of the demands under Project 75I submarine, what we call as development in India. And the first requirement was that the first round of submarines will have 45% indigenous technology, later 60%. And TKMS as of right now is outbidding the Spanish company at all levels to make sure that it can get this project. Now again, this is only the bidding phase. It is still an article which talks about that Navy's mega submarine project, in which we are going to have a new class of submarines which is going to emerge. Let us see what is the name given to it. But the fact is that field evaluation has happened, where our military personnel have gone and checked the factory of the TKMS, and everything looks in place the way it should be. And therefore, this gives you a picture of how India's defense market is very, very important for the world. but how Russia-Ukraine has impacted that also in the larger context of how now it has become, Germany has become more and more aggressive in getting defense contracts. And in India, for them, submarine technology has become important. And for us, it is a good thing because if you have multiple bidders, we get a better deal and we can get all our demands also met. So this also is a developing story. Let us see how it emerges over the long term in that sense. Okay. So in the end, we will discuss the mains questions, and just to reiterate that we have to cover, we have covered, or we have to cover all of these topics in the concept of a mains question. And therefore, when it comes to insurance, you can use it with regards to the ethics sector. When it comes to the Indian defense universities, you can also understand and actually build up with regards to how there's a need for it. And the most important is the water crisis article, which gives you a lot of insight into mitigation. So therefore, the first question is, the need for an Indian defense university is long overdue. Discuss. So this is based on that timeline. If you remember the timeline, you can write the commission's name. You will get good marks in this question. This is a GS paper 2 or 3 as per what the examiner wants. Internal security more suited towards. Second, Bengaluru is a cautionary tale for other urban zones of India. Discuss how can we mitigate such water crisis. 150 words. This is a realistic question for GS paper 3, and you can get questions regards to this also. So therefore, the idea is very simple, very simple, which is the concept of how you can put all of this information into the examination. With this, I would like to end the session. Thank you so much. I will see you soon with regards to the Hindu analysis. And remember the Manzil 24 code, which basically gives you the lowest affordable price, is going to end tomorrow. So do become a part of Unacademy if you want to. Right now, the best time. And do join Chethan sir in the evening for international relations, current affairs. And join me at 6 o'clock for history, fourth session with regards to static, what we call as important topics for the examination. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.